All right, team, we have just 2 days of this read aloud left. We're getting near to the end. We're starting at chapter 73 today. Can you believe it? We've read 72 chapters together so far. That's crazy. So we're going to jump in at chapter 73. It was great seeing your compare and contrast yesterday. It's a really important skill, comparing how Recco's 2 and 3 were destroyed by Roz and her friends. So great job with that. We're going to jump in. We're going to read chapter 73, 74, and 75. And then tomorrow, we'll finish up the book. Crazy. All right, here we go. Chapter 73, The Chase. Recco 1 was standing in the great meadow. He stared up at the smoking hill of ash and then down at the stampede of footprints around it. There had been a large bonfire with hundreds of animals and one robot. But why? The Recco couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. After thoroughly exploring the site, he continued through the meadow and into the forest. It was around that time he lost communications with Recco 3 and Recco 2. He knew his partners had both been destroyed. Recco 1 would have to hunt down the target all by himself. The hunter marched on, his blocky head swiveled from side to side, scanning for any sign of Roz. He was soon gazing across the glassy surface of Beaver Pond. On the far side, a thread of smoke drifted from another of the wooden domes. With his powerful legs, the robot launched himself up through the air, soaring in a high and graceful arc over the pond and down to the other side. His heavy feet slammed into the ground, leaving deep craters in the garden by the dome. He hunched over and looked inside, fur and feathers and dying coals of a fire. But the target wasn't in there. The Recco stood perfectly still and watched as the soft rain started dripping down through the tiers of the forest. And then he sensed it. Up in the canopy was something that didn't belong. Roz had been spotted. The hunter watched his target drop from branch to branch, down to the forest floor. Then she bounded through the thickly tangled underbrush without stirring a leaf, without snapping a twig, and vanished into the green. However, Recco 1 had other means of tracking her. He could sense her electronic signal. The signal was gliding around the edge of the pond, but it was fading fast. A few more seconds and he would lose it entirely. Recco 1 burst into a sprint. The forest seemed to sway and quake from his stomping strides. And a minute later, the forest really did begin to move. Trees were toppling down on the Recco. A tree swung down and hammered his body into the ground. Recco 1 shoved the tree aside, pulled himself up, and continued the hunt. He didn't notice the beavers diving back into the pond. Recco 1 tore through brambles and leaped over boulders, and suddenly the ground was caving beneath him. Down he fell into a deep pit, crashing against the bottom and twisting his leg. The robot violently pounded his leg back into shape. Then he launched himself up and out of the pit. He didn't notice the groundhogs watching from their tunnels. So he didn't notice the beavers, he didn't notice the groundhogs. I wonder what that's hinting at. The hunter faced one trap after another. He was pelted with pine cones, tripped by vines, and crunched by tumbling rocks. The hunter now limped and rattled and was covered in scars, but he kept going. Roz galloped back and forth across the island again and again as she tried to lose Recco 1. But no matter how fast she ran, or how well she hid, or how many animals helped her, she couldn't escape the sound of his stomping footsteps. She had never run so hard for so long, and while her mechanical body was holding up, her wooden foot was not. After hours of pounding, it finally gave out. She was galloping through the rocky forest by the sea cliffs when her foot splintered apart. So I'm pausing for a second. It's like our whole story is really coming together here. We had read in the past, right, about her foot being taken off and how they had fixed it. So that's becoming now important. She's losing her foot. Number 2, we have all these friends helping out. If Roz, imagine at the beginning of the story, Roz didn't have any of these friends. So if the Reccos came for her at the beginning, she would have gone right back. But now she has all these animals fighting for her because she made such wonderful friends. So it's crazy how her time at the island has really brought all of this upon her, and we'll see what happens. So here's Recco 1 dodging through. We'll see if he gets her. As soon as Recco 1 found the fresh wooden splinters, he knew his target was in trouble. He stomped out from the trees onto the cliff top and scanned the coastline below. Geese were flying down through the drizzles. Otters were wriggling over the rocks. Seaweed and driftwood and broken robot parts were scattered around the shore. But the hunter also sensed a faint electronic signal. Roz was down there somewhere. The hunter's blocky hand clamped onto the cliff top, and then, flip, it detached. The hand was connected to a strong cable that spooled out the end of his arm. He gave the cable 2 quick tugs and then stepped off the ledge. Recco 1 zipped down the cliffside. Geese squawked and otters squawked as Recco 1 marched to the robot gravesite. The place was littered with torsos and limbs. They were all valuable parts, but he would have to collect those later. For now, his only concern was finding Roz. He followed the electronic signal over a clump of seaweed. But where was his target? Was Recco 1's sensor malfunctioning or not working? The robot tapped his head a few times, but the mysterious signal remained. He looked around for other signs of her, and as he did, the clump of seaweed reached up and grabbed him. What are your thoughts on that? What's the clump of seaweed? The seaweed's clearly moving. It grabbed him. What do we know about Roz and her friends? Maybe camouflage? All right. Chapter 74 is The Click. 4 robot hands were clamped around Recco 1. He loomed above. Roz lay below, camouflaged in seaweed. For a moment, all was still. And then the hunter suddenly lurched and twisted as he tried to rip the laser away from his target. But Roz held on. Seaweed fell from her body, and she was lifted right off the ground. Her legs dangled in the air until she pounded a foot and a stump against the hunter's chest, leaned back, and pulled on the laser with all her might. Waves crashed as the robot grappled for the laser, but Roz was no match for Recco 1. He was too big and too strong. Roz could feel her body being pulled apart. She could also feel the laser being pulled apart. A faint glow appeared between her hands. The glow grew brighter and brighter, and then a blinding explosion launched the robots in opposite directions. When the smoke cleared, shreds of the laser were everywhere. Recco 1's body was pocked with holes, and one arm was charred. Roz's arms and legs had been blown off completely. She was now just a torso and a head, so an upper body, right, from like her belly up and her head. Inside her computer brain, our robot's survival instincts were blaring. Her body simply could not take it anymore. Clearly, Roz was not designed for combat, but the Recco was. He pulled himself to his feet and hobbled toward his target. Roz wanted to get up and run away, but without arms and legs, she couldn't move. She could only speak. "Speak. Please do not deactivate me," she said. Recco 1 ignored her. His blocky hand reached past her face and touched the back of her head. Click. What do you guys predict? We know that her button's been pushed before, right? Brightbill tested it out. If what's true of last time is true of this time, she'll turn back on. Chapter 75, The Last Laser. With the target deactivated, Recco 1 calmly moved to the next phase of his mission. He limped through and collected every single robot part from the gravesite. He splashed in the shallows and returned with a foot. He shook from the sand with a torso, and he pulled one of the robot heads out of the tide pool. Each part was then piled around Roz's body. Brightbill watched in horror as his mother slowly appeared in a pile of parts. Roz looked just like the others, but she wasn't dead, as he knew. She had just been shut down. "Don't do it, Brightbill!" The flock had tried to stop their leader. "It's too dangerous." But the goose was determined to bring his mama back to life. Brightbill crouched low in the ground and slowly moved toward the pile. And when Recco 1 limped away to collect another part, Brightbill sprinted over the rocks, pushed past the arms and legs, squeezed into the pile, and click. A muffled voice echoed. "Hello, I am Rosum, Unit 7134, but you may call me Roz." Brightbill hugged his mother's face as her computer brain rebooted. "Mama, wake up!" "What happened?" she said finally. "Where's the Recco? He's coming this way." "What were you thinking, Brightbill? You must leave now before he gets both of us." I was scared, Mama, cried the goose. I didn't know what to do. Heavy footsteps stomped toward them. Robot parts were knocked aside, and then Recco 1 looked down with glowing eyes. Mama, help! Brightbill tried to squirm away, but thick fingers locked around him. Please don't hurt my son, begged Roz. Please, he's harmless. Recco 1 didn't pay attention. He just held up the goose in his big hand. Mist swirled in the breeze. Waves sloshed against the rocks. Seagulls circled above. No, not seagulls. Vultures. And one of them had Recco's laser in his beak. They spiraled down and clattered to the shore. Geese and otters quickly surrounded the laser. They squawked and squeaked and fumbled, trying to aim the laser. The hunter was confused. How had those animals gotten a laser? And how could they possibly know how to use it? They didn't know. The geese had seen that hunter before, if you remember. And this was very similar. A beam of light briefly flashed through the gloom. At first it seemed as nothing had happened, but a moment later, Recco's chest began glowing a bright orange, and then it was melting and oozing. His hand suddenly unclenched, and Brightbill fluttered away. Whew. Seawater sprayed over the robot gravesite. Steam hissed up from Recco's scorching guts. He shook and twitched and collapsed beside Roz. Recco 1 turned his face to Roz and spoke in a garbled voice. More Reccos will come for you. And if you destroy them, still more will come. The makers will not rest until all the missing robots have been retrieved. When will they come? Said Roz. How long do we have? You can still be fixed, Roz. Go to the airship. Bring all the robot parts with you. The ship knows what to do. His voice went silent. His eyes not aglow. Recco 1 was gone. All right. We're going to finish up tomorrow. All 3 Reccos are gone. Roz is a torso and a head. He's telling her to go to the airship. Will she do it? Or will she stay on the island? I don't know. All right. Talk to you tomorrow.